All right. It's good to be back with you again. Let's open in prayer. Father, we thank you for the life of your servant Jacob. We pray that you would just open our eyes and hearts this morning as we look at your word and look at his life. Ask your blessing upon our time together and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, so today we are going to look at Jacob, and particularly Genesis 32, which is kind of the culmination of his story. After that, it kind of shifts more to his sons, though he is definitely still around. What do you know about Jacob?
Son of Isaac.
Okay, son of Isaac. And Isaac was the son of
Abraham.
who got all the promises and all the good stuff. So when they talk about the forefathers of patriarchs, you usually think Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, good. What else do you know about Jacob?
He's a trickster.
Okay, he's a trickster. He has some episodes that we might kind of wonder about. Well, is that kind of stuff we're supposed to emulate? We'll go through a couple of those, but yeah, he has a well-deserved reputation as a trickster, or some would even say deceiver.
Pulling the wool over people's eyes.
Yes.
That's come down to us, pulling the wool over.
Somebody
Exactly.
showed him the ladder,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. All right, good. What else do you know about Jacob?
Twin brother, Esau.
Yeah, he had twin brother Esau. Now, which one was older?
Esau.
Esau, right? Do you know what Jacob means?
He's deceiving. Or to heel, grasp the heel.
To grasp the heel. Or that word could also mean, it's kind of a word play, one who supplants. And so when Esau was born, he came out, he was all red and hairy, and so they called him Esau, and there was a little hand on his heel, and that was Jacob. And the implication seems to be Jacob was trying to pull him back so he could get in front. That's how it gets interpreted later in scripture, and it seems to fit with what Jacob, how he turns out. When his mother was pregnant, Rebecca, she felt this kind of turmoil in her, and so she went to God, and he says, well, you've got two nations in your womb. It's not just one, you got two. And he gave her this prophecy. This is Genesis 25:23. He said, the older shall serve the younger, which is kind of against the normal way of things, though not against God's way of things. He's kind of continually elevating the younger sibling. If you read through these stories in Genesis. And why does he do that? Well, because he's God, and to demonstrate he can do what he wants, and he can choose who he wants, as it's the point that gets made in the New Testament. So yeah, he was originally a twin. We skip over their earlier years and jump straight to a time where they are adults in the story. And Esau comes in, and he's been working out in the field. Esau is kind of the man's man, work out in the fields and loves to hunt and fish. And Jacob is more of a stay-at-home kind of guy. Though he's apparently pretty big and strong too, because when he goes looking for a wife, he's able to roll this huge stone away all by himself. And later, as we'll see in our passage today, he wrestles this man or angel and is able to kind of corral him and keep him from moving on. So Jacob is more the bookish type, but he's still pretty big and strong. Isaac likes which of his sons best? Esau, right? He goes out and gets game, and Isaac, likes to eat good game. And Rebecca likes which one of her sons the best? Jacob. We mentioned he's a deceiver. Well, guess who he gets that from?
Her.
Yeah, and her family. As we'll see as we kind of go through his story, there's no compunction about, deceiving or, doing whatever you need to do to get what you want in her family. So Esau comes in, he's been out hunting, he's hungry, and Jacob happens to have been making this nice stew. And so Esau comes in and he's like, red stuff, give it to me. And Jacob's like, well, that smells good. Tell me your birthright. I'll give you some soup. And Esau's like, I'm dying here, man. Give it to me. Whatever, you can have it. So, Jacob, and scripture says, thus Esau despised his birthright. Okay, no deception here, just, kind of taking advantage of Esau's condition of, being really hungry. So he gets Esau's birthright of the firstborn. A little while later, Isaac, their father, not doing well. They know the end is near. He can't really see very well. And Esau goes out, or he tells Esau, go out and find me some good game, prepare a good meal, and I'll give you my blessing. And this is like the blessing, the big blessing that the father passes on to his firstborn. Esau's like, okay. So he runs out, and Rebecca, whose idea is this? It's Rebecca's idea. Says, Jacob, come here. Go kill a couple of our goats, and I'll prepare them, make them like he likes it, and then you take it in and pretend you're Esau. He's like, Mom, Esau's this big hairy guy. I got smooth skin. He's never going to fall for it. She's like, I'll take care of it. Just go. So he goes. He gets it. She prepares it. She gives him the skin of the goats to put on, so he'll feel hairy. And so he goes in and says, okay, Dad, I got your meal here. Isaac's like, well, that was quick. Like, well, God provided. So he's eager to please you. Says, come closer. Let me feel you. And so he goes closer, and he's wearing Esau's clothes, so you'd have that field smell about him. And so Isaac, touches his arms and feels the goat skin. He's like, well, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the arms are the arms of Esau. And he leans in to kiss him and says, yeah, I smell Esau. This is Esau. And so he gives him his blessing. And so this is how Jacob obtains the blessing. Right after he leaves, Esau comes in, he's all mad. And the blessing that he gets, dew of heaven, fatness of earth, abundance of grain and wine be yours, and you will be master of your brothers. And basically all your relatives. So he's basically saying you're going to be the one that's in charge, which is in line with the original prophecy, right? Which raises the question, well, is this all based on some deception? But anyway, Esau comes back, and as you might guess, he's not pleased. He says, okay, I got your meal, Dad. And Isaac says, well, you were just here. No, I wasn't. I was out getting your game that you wanted. Said, oh, Wolf, sorry, I already gave your blessing away. Well, can't you give me something? Nope, sorry. And then, he gives him some little blessing that doesn't really sound much like a blessing. But basically, and so Esau says, all right, I'm going to kill Jacob. I've had it with this guy. And so who hears of this? Well, Rebecca. And said, oh, don't want Jacob to die. We need to get him out of the picture for a while. So what does she do? She goes to Isaac and says, oh, these Canaanite wives of Esau are going to be the death of me. I am not going to let Jacob marry one of them. I can't have it. I said, all right, well, we'll send him back to your family to find a wife. That's convenient. It gets him out of the picture. Lets Esau cool down. So Isaac blesses him, sends him on to Paddan Aram, Haran, where Rebecca was from. It's interesting, as he's leaving kind of what we would come to know the promised land, the sun sets. And so he lies down and has a dream. Does anyone know what he dreams of?
A ladder or something?
About a ladder, Jacob's ladder. It's not actually his ladder, he just saw it. And what he sees on this ladder are angels going up and down. Okay, he realizes this is a place of connection between heaven and earth. It's interesting because when he comes back home in chapter 32, he again meets angels. And the idea seems to be that there are angels guarding this land. And so when he goes out, when he comes in, he's interacting with angels. In the dream, the Lord also appears to him and promises him the land where he's lying, promise him, your seed is going to multiply. It sounds a lot like what he promised Abraham. And then he tells him, I am with you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. Okay, so he's got this promise that God is going to be with him. This is Genesis 28:15. Well, he heads on, and it's interesting because, night falls when he's leaving. When he comes back and is wrestling with the angel, it's about to dawn. And so this excursus in Paddan Aram with Laban and his mother's family is kind of like his dark night of the soul, before he comes back and dawns again. Well, he goes to his mother's family, and he sees Rachel coming to water her father's flocks, and he's like, well, who is this? And it turns out that she's, his uncle's daughter, which is exactly the family he was looking for. And so he immediately, first he moves this huge stone so she can water her sheep, and then he goes to Laban and says, hey, I want to marry her. And says, well, I guess better you than any of these local yokels. Jacob says, I'll work for you 7 years. All right. So he works the 7 years, and then what happens? Yeah. Rachel happened to have been the younger daughter. And she was also apparently much prettier. And so the father, Laban, was thinking, well, no one's going to want Leah. So they had the big wedding arrives, and then at the last minute, he kind of sticks Leah in instead of Rachel, and Jacob doesn't notice until the next morning, and he's like, hey, wait a minute. He goes to Laban and says, this isn't what I signed up for. Remember who he gets all of his trickster tendencies from, right? It's his mother's families.
Read what you said.
Yeah. And Laban says, well, I guess you didn't know that in our, this area, it's custom that you can't marry off the younger daughter until the older daughter's married. But, if you're willing to work another 7 years, I'll give you her too. Finish your honeymoon week with Leah, and then I'll give you Rachel. So what can he do? He's in love. Says, all right, I'll work another 7 years. And he finishes with Leah. He marries Rachel. Which wife does he love more? Rachel, right? And so Leah, feels kind of rejected, and God sees, and so he blesses Leah, and she starts to just pop out the children, whereas Rachel is barren for a long time. Eventually, and each of them get a maid that comes with them, and when they get tired of producing children, they give him the maids, and they produce children, and he ends up with 12 children who become the 12 tribes of Israel. He finishes his 14 years of working for Laban, says, all right, it's all done. I'm getting ready to head home. And Laban says, well, actually, hold on 1 minute. I've noticed that God blesses me when you're with me. So I'd kind of like for you to stay. What do you say? What do you want your wage to be? And so Jacob, all right, I got a way to get something here. Says, all right, all I want for my wage is give me all the speckled and striped goats and the black sheep. And this will make it easy to tell, that I'm not stealing from you, because, you can come look, and if I have any white sheep or any goats that aren't speckled or striped, then obviously they're yours. But, any of those will be mine. Laban's like, all right. And then Jacob gets these rods. that, are kind of striped or speckled. And so when the sheep come to the watering hole or the goats come to the watering hole, if they're strong goats and sheep, then he would stick these little rods out in front of them before they mate, so that they would produce speckled or striped or, black sheep. And this apparently works. So he's got this little scheme going, which makes absolutely no sense. Like, why would just putting a little stick out there that's got stripes or speckles, cause the offspring to be striped or speckled? But his flocks keep growing. And Laban's, the goats and sheep that are born, regular colors and whatnot, they're all pretty weak. So Laban's flocks are kind of dwindling, and Jacob's flocks are growing stronger and stronger.
Can you explain that a little further? I still have trouble with that.
Yes, because it makes absolutely no sense, right? And what we
trying to
learn,
figure that out for years.
yeah, what we learn later, because
We need to get a genealogist in here, I guess.
yeah. Why are we doing that today? Just stick them out. No, those are not good. I'm not going to put them out this time. Let Laban have the offspring of those two.
They're from state, they ought to know.
So we find out. So what happens? And this is to your question. Eventually, Laban's family starts saying, "Well, I don't know about this guy because he's getting all of our wealth." And so they're not too happy with it. And Laban's not, because he says, now that you've kind of started working for yourself and not so much for me, I'm not being blessed like I was before. So it's not so much fun having you around. And so the Lord tells Jacob, okay, time to head back. Go back to your family. And so Jacob goes to make the case to his wives, hey, let's go back to my family, leave your family. We've had enough here. And when he does this, this is chapter 31. It says, verse 4, so Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field and said to them, I see your father's attitude, but it is not friendly towards me as formerly. But the God of my father has been with me. And you know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. Okay, so we learned that Laban's kind of deceitful dealing didn't stop with Leah and Rachel. Right? When he saw that, the sheep were producing, a lot of black sheep, all right, well, let's change the terms and you can get these sheep instead. And this is what he says. If he spoke thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth speckled. And if he spoke thus, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth striped. Thus, God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. And it came about at the time when the flock were mating that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. So why were all the goats and sheep producing things that fit Jacob's criteria? Because God was doing it. It had nothing to do with these rods and the things that he was trying to stick in front. And this is kind of the overriding lesson of Jacob's story. Right? God had made certain promises and prophecies about Jacob. He didn't have to go through all these machinations because God was going to do it. He was going to get the blessing. He was going to get the birthright. He was going to get, but, and the New Testament, Romans 9, Paul makes this point. This is on your handout at the bottom. Not only this, but there was Rebekah also when she had conceived twins by one man, our father Isaac. For though the twins were not yet born and not done anything good or bad, so that God's purpose according to his choice would stand, not because of works, but because of him who calls. It was said to her, the older will serve the younger, just as it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. coming at this Romans verse through a Protestant lens, we tend to think, it's not about his works. It's not about his good works. But it's actually not about his bad works either. Yeah, Jacob, was deceptive and trickstery, and that didn't change the fact that God had chosen to bless him. Does that make sense? So yes, he and Laban were trying to trick each other and changing terms and then changing the sticks, and it didn't matter. Because as you point out, it doesn't make sense that would work. That wasn't what did it. It was God. God saw what Laban was doing. He says, you know what? All right, I'll change the way they're mating it. I'll change what they're producing. Because it was God who was blessing Jacob. Right? And that's what Jacob is starting to learn at this point. Because he doesn't tell them, well, look, I put little sticks out and that made them, he realized, I saw in a dream, God said he did this. He's the one that did it. But, old ways are hard to change. And so he decides to leave, and instead of going to Laban and say, okay, look, thank you for everything. We're going to head home now. He said, all right, let's leave in the middle of the night and just kind of not be here when they wake up in the morning. And the Bible says he deceived Laban by doing this. Right? 'Cause he's supposed to be, overseeing the flock, and they just decide to up and leave. And Rachel, following in her family's tradition, decides she's going to steal the household gods first. So when Laban realizes they have left, he's really mad, obviously. But he goes chasing after them because he wants his household gods. So he chases after them, catches up with them, but before he goes in, guess who appears to Laban in a dream? God. It says, I know you're upset, but don't say anything good or bad to Jacob. And Laban's like, ah! So he goes into Jacob and he says, your God said I can't, do or say anything to you, but I'm really upset because you stole my God. Why'd you have to steal my God? You could have just gone and said, fine. And Jacob has no idea what's going on. He's like, I didn't steal your gods. Take a look. Anything in my property that you find that's yours, whoever took it will die. People are making all these silly oaths. So Laban goes searching, and Rachel realizes, I'm in trouble. And so what does she do? Well, she's well practiced in the art of deception. So she puts them in the saddlebag, sits on it, and then says, when they come into her tent, hey, look, it's my time of the month. Don't make me get up. Okay. So this is our, model family. So they survive, and he and Laban part on good terms. They build a little altar and say, okay, this will stand as a memorial that I'm not going to come across to harm you. You're not going to come across to harm me. Laban, by the way, is like, look, everything I look around here is mine. My daughters, they're my sons, they're my flocks. So, maybe Jacob was right to, kind of sneak out, but Laban leaves. And then they start heading back toward home, and who's waiting at home? So Esau. And what was the last thing Esau had said about Jacob? I'm going to kill him. Stole my birthright, not really, but stole my blessing. Jacob's afraid now. He was afraid. The reason he snuck away from Laban is because he was afraid. He was afraid that Laban was going to try to keep his wives and sons. Now he's afraid again that Esau's going to come and kill his wives and sons as well. He has a family now, and that gives him reason to be afraid. And he's afraid because he's been dealing dishonestly with these people. Right? He thinks it's his machinations that have kind of, gotten him this blessing, and So that fills him with fear because these people are not happy with him because he hasn't treated them very well. So Genesis 32 starts out, now as Jacob went on his way, the angels of God met him. Right, so he's entering back into what would become the promised land. And so here are the angels right on cue. The word angels is actually the word messengers. That's what angel means. They're messengers. And throughout this passage, you're going to see kind of spiritual side and physical side kind of paralleling each other. Right, so when Jacob saw the angels, he said, this is God's camp or company. So he named that place Mahanaim, which means two companies. So you got God's company, you got my company. And this kind of two has run throughout the Jacob story, from twins to two wives to here we're going to see he's going to divide his family into two companies. Which, where did he get that idea? Oh, well, he'd already named the place two companies because he had God's company and his company. And so what does he do? He sends messengers, same word as the angels that he just met. So he sends messengers to Esau to kind of scope out how things are going. And they come back and say, hey, Esau's coming with 400 men. Like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. And so he decides, all right, because Jacob he's like a good businessman. He's always troubleshooting and always come up with a backup plan and how are we going to mitigate this? And so he decided, all right, I'm going to split my families and flocks into two, and we'll have two companies. Again, where did he get that idea? Well, he just got it from this spiritual revelation. He says, then at least if Esau goes and attacks one, the other can get away. So, I might not be able to save everybody, but at least, we can get half of them through. So he does that. And then he decides, okay, it's not enough just to split in two. We need to send Esau a tribute. And so he, pulls out 200 female goats, 200 ewes, 20 male goats, 20 rams, 30 milking camels. He puts together this nice package and sends this on ahead as it's called tribute, which was appropriate, to give to an older, to a sovereign. So he sends that on ahead and tells the servants with it, say, this is verse 18, it's a present sent to my lord Esau. And by the way, he's also coming. He's behind us. And in verse 20, he says, I will appease him with the present that goes before me. Then afterward, I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. Right? And so two words to kind of pay attention to as you read Genesis 32 are company, companies, and face. And then carrying into 33. So ultimately, this is all about, when I come face to face with Esau, I really hope he accepts me. Because I know I haven't treated him very well in the past. So he's trying to make up for that now. So night falls. He takes his wives and his children, crosses the river Jabbok, sends them on across the stream, and he's left alone. Okay, and this is the passage that you have on your handout, verses 24 to 32. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with it. Then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? He said, Jacob. He said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. because to come into the presence of God, to see God's face was to die. He says he's been preserved. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh and the sinew of the hip. Okay? So he has this encounter with a man. We don't know a lot about this figure. He seems to be divine. The fact that Jacob concludes by saying, I've seen God face to face and lived, would suggest that maybe it was God. But it could also mean that it was one of God's messengers, because to see the angel of the Lord was effectively to see God. It's curious that this stranger doesn't know his name. Or again, it could just be God asking a question that he already knows the answer to. And Jacob is apparently able to keep him from moving on. Like he says, let me go. No, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. So the stranger does. He blesses him. And Jacob realizes that he's come face to face with God, and yet his life has been preserved. His name is changed to Israel, which literally probably means God prevails, but is interpreted here to mean he has prevailed with God. And it's interesting, Robert Alter points out, unlike other name changes that we've seen, like when Abram becomes Abraham, Abraham just becomes the new name. He's referred to as Abraham. That doesn't happen with Jacob. He's still called Jacob throughout, and Israel becomes a synonym. So like in the poetry of later books, you'll see one line with Jacob and the next line with Israel. You never see that with Abram and Abraham. So it's not that Israel is replacing his name so much as becoming a second name. So he has this encounter. Hosea expressly identifies it as an angel. And really this encounter kind of encompasses Jacob's whole life to this point. Ever since the beginning, he's been wrestling, right? He was trying to wrestle Esau back into the womb so he could get out. He's wrestled with people, he's wrestled with God. Always afraid he's not going to come out on top and trying to get to the top, when God had already chosen him for that position anyway. And what does he emerge out of this encounter with? A limp. A limp. A constant reminder that it's not about what he can do. Right? And when he finally gets the blessing and gets peace, because after he meets Esau, it's going to say he moved on in peace. It's when he's been kind of taken out of the game. He's gotten this injury. So after this, in chapter 33, he moves on to meet Esau. Okay. And how do you think that goes?
Esau kissed.
Yeah. Yeah, Jacob sees him coming and starts, bows 7 times on his way up to Esau, and he's still afraid, doesn't know what Esau's going to do, and Esau runs up to him, and he's like, oh, and Esau just embraces him and starts kissing him, and he's like, brother, you came home finally. Right? God had changed his heart because he didn't want to kill his brother. And it's interesting. Verse 8, Esau says, what do you mean by all this company which I have met? I mean, all this tribute that he has sent. And it was called tribute before. But Jacob tells him, well, I did it to find favor in the sight of my Lord. Right? And throughout this encounter, that's how he's going to refer to Esau, as my Lord. right? Which, remember, what was it he, fought so hard to get? The right to have Esau serve him, right? And now he's, in a sense, giving that back, right? And Esau says, I have plenty. I have enough, my brother. God had actually blessed Esau. I have enough. I don't need this. Let what you have be your own. And Jacob says, no, please, if now I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one sees the face of God, which is a very curious phrase. And you have received me favorably. This is, again, hearkening back to what he just went through. He kind of saw the face of God in that encounter, whether it was actually seeing God's face or coming to realize God's presence in the situation, and how God had been constantly present. Because what was it God had promised him? I am going to be with you. And so he comes to realize God's actually been with me. God was the one that was causing the sheep to, produce the right colors. And God is the one who protected me from Laban. And God is the one who has, brought me back safely to my homeland as he promised he would. Right? And now in Esau's embrace, he sees God's face again. God's at work again. And so verse 11, he says, take my blessing, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have, and in English here it says plenty, as if it were the same word Esau said, but it's not. It's I have everything. Esau says, I have enough. I have plenty. Jacob says, I have everything. Take my blessing. Right? Well, what was it he had stolen from Esau? The blessing. And here he realized, I didn't need to do that. I already had God's blessing. God was with me. He says, take my blessing. Esau says, okay, I'll take it. And so he's finally able to make right all these things that he had made wrong in the pursuit of something he already had. Right? And it says, if you skip down to verse 18, Jacob came in peace. The city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. He finally has peace. Because he finally realized that I don't have to do all this and strive and try to figure out ways to get to the top, because God is with me. God's going to make the way. I don't have to deal with people deceptively and try to scheme and trick them in order to get what I need or what I want. Because God is with me and he's blessing me. And that enables him to not only stop scheming, but to also be generous. Right? And so he gives back the very thing he'd been scheming for. Take my blessing, Esau. It's yours. I have everything. I have God with me. That's all I need. That makes sense? So as you go through this week, think about the fact that you have God with you. Really? That's all you need. Have a good one.
Thank you, Brad.